Alright, I'm going to show y'all how I built the frame for my 49 Dodge pickup for a rat rod. I went ahead and cut the metal to kind of save some time. This piece, there's two of those. They are, you measure out kind of how you want it. How I done mine was I measured from the back of the cab up to the front and measured out how long it was going to take to run a frame rail under it, and then at the back of the cab it'll come up and go over my rear end and I can hang my bed on it. So my measurements, and not everybody be the same, so please don't go off my measurements. You'll have to kind of work with it. So under my cab is 48 inches, so I cut two sticks 48 inches long. And then where my engine will set, I cut two pieces and they are 40 inches long. And then my crossover bar for the front end, it is 30 inches wide. And so I'm going to make my frame 30 inches wide, and that'll be big enough for me to set the engine in. And also, when you get on your front suspension, if you go too wide, with your radius arms, you won't be able to turn. So you have to kind of find a happy medium, the frame not be too wide and hit your radius arms and not be too narrow, and let your motor fit in there well. This was started out as a 20-foot stick of 2x3 1/4-inch tubing, and I cut the under the body, the front rails for where the engine will go, the crossover piece, these right here, they'll basically make the frame Z, and I 45'd on each side. Nothing crazy. When you make your first 45, you just literally cut the same direction both times, so you'll have two identical ones. And then this is the excess we had left over from where I cut the first angle, and I'm cheap, so I save all of my stuff, and this will make a great gusset here when I go behind the cab to go up into the frame rail to go over the rear end. So I always save all these little pieces for stuff like that, and you can go ahead and gusset your frame. Now what I will do is when I put all these together, I will come back on the inside rail and put a gusset in over each weld to help strengthen it and not let the weld flex and potentially crack. Because I'm going to, when I ground these down, I don't know if you can see it very well, but in order to get a good weld, you want to take and clean your end up with a grinder and then angle, what's called bevel, this end right here just a little bit. So when you join your two pieces of metal together, you'll actually have a groove for your weld to lay in. So if you want to grind it back down flat to make it all at one piece, there's still weld laying in that groove, and then of course you get it hot enough to penetrate your metal to where it'll hold, and you won't have to worry about it cracking going down the road. I don't suggest, if you don't have any fabricating skills or know how to use a welder, to not try this at home, because this is pretty time consuming. And not only that, but if you're going to take and build a car to drive on the highway, you need to build it right. You don't want to be hitting a bump, because I know I live in Tennessee, and for the most part we have really good roads, but there's sometimes you'll hit a bridge, and if you don't have say a good built frame under that car, you get one of those bridges hard enough, that's a lot of shock going through that metal, and you could potentially crack a weld. So take your time. You know, if you're wanting to build this car and keep it, you know, like I am, I've never sold any of the cars that I've built as far as rat rod styles. I've been hanging on to them. I'll say that I've only built one right now and got a couple more in the works. But take the time when you're welding this, make sure when you put the frame together, you're beveling these in so you got a good place to lay your bead in. And take your time and weld it right. Don't skip out on metal. You know, some people argue that 2x3 is not big enough, go to 2x4. And unless you're just going something crazy motor wise, if you're doing a small block Chevy, small block Ford, small block Mopar, even a big block as I'm putting in this one, this is going to be for my 49 Dodge truck. So I'm actually going to put a big block in there and build a dually style. So take the time, don't cheap out on metal. This is quarter-inch wall thick. Yeah, I could have saved a couple bucks and went with, say, you know, 3/16 or, you know, a little bit thinner wall. But at the end of the day, I'm building this car to last, not to break in 2 years and I got to go back in and fix it again. So let me get to all this ground down and get to where I can start tacking it up, and I'll be right back. Okay, right here is where you want to get started. See, this right here is the rail that goes under the body of my truck cab, and then when I get to the back, it's going to come up and go over my rear end. So this will be the first row you start with. I took and cleaned all of it out good with a grinder so we can have a good weld. So right here will be at the back of my cab for my rails coming up. So we're gonna take and hook on our clamp for our welder, and then we're gonna come right here to the front rail, and this is how it will lay in, just like this right here. And then basically I have a Z frame to where my cab can set lower than my front rail, and then that'll give me clearance for my engine to set down in, and also this rail will help with suspension. When I get out to the front, I can take and have the car set lower to the ground and still have full working suspension and not be worried about it. So you take, and then what I'll do is I'm actually going to come in right here with another gusset and double this. You don't have to, but say this is my rail, and I've ground these off so the bottom side will match on this, and this one will be for my driver's side. So here and on the inside going across will be where this bar goes. So basically you take one of each of what you've done built, and you will lay it just like this right here. Make sure everything butts up flush. And right there I've got a groove that I can weld in. And you know your welder. Make sure everything's clean around the tip. Make sure you can get good gas flow to it. I'm welding with 035 solid wire. It works great for stuff like this. I would say I'd show you welder settings. Each welder is different. Just because I've got the settings on my welder a certain way don't mean that you would run them the exact same way on yours. So with the rails butted up, there's a nice little groove right in there to lay a bead on. Same way on the top. Now I'll get this one good and tacked in where I want it. Then I'll move to the top. Then what I'll do is right here is I'm gonna bring in another gusset for extra support, and it will basically go from right here straight up, and it will be made out of 2x2. And then on the top side, I can do several things with it. I can come down with a piece of plate, but probably what I'll do on the top side is I will just go ahead and make it go with the flow of this, and I can just chop that off. Or I could do the same thing on the top side and double gusset it on both sides. It's kind of, you know, your opinion, however you want to do it. There's no right, there's no wrong way of doing it. It's just whatever you prefer and however you want it to look. So let me get set up here and we'll get to welding. So you make sure this one is set and flush. And I always like to do some good tacks. Once you get all tacked this corner, the bottom side corner, and also we'll tack this corner right here. Get a good 4 tacks on it. That way you know it can't go front to back or side to side. Make sure they're good tacks. You don't want to be trying to move it around and all of a sudden one of your tacks break loose. And then you line this one and see if you move it down like that, create a gap on that side. Go too far that way, it creates a gap on this side. It's like this one, you want to lay it in where it's flush and no gaps. And the same way, you'll do 4 good tacks on it. Now the reason I'll put my tack kind of in that corner and in this corner here is you want your frame rails to be identical. You want them to match. So after you get this good and tacked on, you take your next piece of metal that goes under your cab and you lay it right on top of the metal that's there. Butt it up, line it up, make sure it's good. This top has already been ground down. Same way with this one, been ground. So it should lay right there and lay perfect. Then you take this one, see where that was ground to that side and the other one is ground on the bottom side. So this is actually the left rail and this, or I'm sorry, this will be the right frame rail and this will be your left rail. So passenger, driver side. So I've ground this side, so that means the bottom right here is ground. Make sure everything is lined up, and then you have 2 identical frame rails, so you can take this one and tack it on as well. And it never hurts to double check. Make sure you're right the first time to where you only have to do it once and you don't cut it apart. So we'll tack it. Now we can look down and we have two identical frame rails, and we have what they call a Z, where basically the front of the cab will set right in this V. This will go under the body of the truck cab. This will go forward for your engine to go. So we can drop it down. This is what they call a Z in a frame. Pretty simple. Just measure twice, cut once, take your time welding it. Make sure that you're getting it in there, you know, getting it welded good. And then when I get this one done, like this one, since it's being the right frame rail, I'll come right here, cut a basically square plate, and I'll turn it and I'll make it diamond shape, and I'll do that on the inside of the rail to where on the outside there's no plate there and it looks like it's just been butt welded, but I have the support on the inside. If you really wanted to, you could do them on both sides. It's not against the rules. Yeah, it would add in a little bit extra strength, so none of this would flex, but do you have to? Personally, I don't think you do. It's literally a preference. How do you want it done? Not too bad of a weld. Not too bad to be literally in my sunroom on the back of my house that I've turned into my shop. My plan is to build this car, build this frame. This is just a flat concrete surface. It's actually got some outdoor linoleum or whatever you want to call it down. So this car, my goal is build this car for under $1,000. I'll go into the build detail in another video. My goal is to build this car for under $1,000. I've got one I built under $1,000 and everybody said I couldn't do it. Well, this shall be another one. I know you got to get in the woods and beat down the weeds and find stuff sometimes, but I literally found a '49 Dodge cab for $100 and had to drag it out of the weeds. And that's not too rusted. You just have to get out there and look. The stuff's out there. Alright, now we got the rails done. Y'all are gonna call me crazy, but this, since I've got this linoleum down, I got a perfectly straight line to line this up on. And this is just a little kind of hack cheat that I've got that I can use. So say my line that goes straight across, I can put that frame rail right on the line where this frame rail is, and it makes both frame rails straight. And then I'll use my speed square to make sure that my crossbar is perfectly at 90 degrees going on both ones, and I can set it on the top and make sure it's level across the top. Now if you don't have this reference lines like I do to go along with, that's perfectly fine. You can lay a chalk line on your concrete floor. You can lay a straight edge and run a marker however long you need straight across there. So my frame rails being 30 inches wide in center, you could buy a yardstick, and that's 36 inches, so you could run it from here all the way across the full length of the yardstick and have your straight line to match rail to rail. So that's just a little trick to get you a lot closer to being perfectly square on frame rail to frame rail. Alright, now for right here, this is that extra gusset that I was going to add in there. All you do is take line it up where you want it, like that right there. Get the gap that you want right here. Take a marker, mark it, and mark it. Make sure you cut on this side of the line and this side of the line. Because if you cut on this side of the line, it ends up being too short and you may not fit it in there. And then we'll take a grinder and kind of clean these little burrs up, and we'll go ahead and weld them, and it will actually leave a little gap in between this and our gusset to where to fit up top, since I'm only using 2x2. And if you wanted to, you can always come back and lay a plate in there to connect the two. I may stitch weld it just to connect them, but I think the two together is going to be good enough. Just like I've done with that one right there. And it looks different because it's got that little gap in it. I like being different, something nobody else has. And that's what we come out. We have this gusset welded in right here, so it kind of doubles it. I left a little gap in there just to make it look a little bit different. I didn't stitch weld or nothing right in there. I just left the gap. And then that's our front rails where we go, the engine's going to set. Comes back. Right here is where the front of the cab goes. Drops down. Then we come on back, and that's what goes under the body. Got my crossover. We're at 30 inches wide on this frame. And I think I'm gonna wrap it up for the night and start back fresh in the morning or tomorrow afternoon, and we'll start building, at least get it set on under the cab. And it always helps to double check. Measure twice, cut once. Always double check that this frame fits the way you want it to. I know my engine, the fan is going to come to about right here on the engine, because I'll shove it all the way back, and then I'll have enough room to put the radiator, and I'm going to build my fan shroud, or I'll buy one, or more than likely I'll build it, and I'll let it drop over the suicide axle and then come up. And then right here I can take and drop down a little gusset, either down in here or up in here, but more than likely I'll do it down in here because I want to run it straight. Your radius arm needs to go straight, so as you're driving down the road, if it's at an angle, it can cause it to maybe hop just a little bit. I may be wrong on that, but that's kind of my experience. But if you run the arm perfectly straight, then basically when you're going down the road, any kind of bump you hit, it's trying to shove backwards, and it can't because it's pushing straight on it. That's just my opinion, but somebody else may be able to enlighten me a little bit more on that, so I can weld onto this right here with however I want to do it. If I want to do a triangle, just I can drill a hole straight in it, or I can come up a little bit more, and there is my mount for my radius arm that goes out to my front end. And I think I'm gonna wrap it up.